Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women. And today we're talking about how freedom of speech, human rights and religious tolerance empower women and help them improve their future. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Whitney Buchanan. Whitney is the founder of the Middle East Collective, where East meets West, supporting religious freedom, diversity, gender equality, and human rights. They're all issues which have a great impact on women and women's empowerment and are viewed very differently depending on the part of the world that you're in. Whitney has a background in global affairs and has lived in countries such as Turkey, Egypt, Germany, and Uganda, as well as her native America. So she's seen many different visions of women's empowerment and economic development. Amazing, Whitney. So welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really been looking forward to this discussion.
It's great. I can't believe you've been to so many countries. I mean, what a wonderful experience.
Thank you. It's been really interesting, especially living in these places during the Arab Spring and the uprising.
Oh God, yes. So tell me, you've done so much already in your career. How did you start and what led you to choose this particular career path?
I began really advocating for women and girls' empowerment when I was in high school, but it wasn't until late 2006 that I truly became an advocate for freedom of religion and religious tolerance while at the University of Tennessee. I was very active in my community and involved in a number of projects that focused on gender equality and religious tolerance, which helped me prepare for this path. But I think the moment I was really moved to make this work part of my professional life is when a number of Islamophobic incidents began occurring in Knoxville, Tennessee, and on campus, and especially when some of my best friends who are Muslim American and Middle Eastern American felt incredibly threatened by the growing anti-Muslim sentiments happening throughout the South.
Oh, really? Oh, what a horrible experience. I mean, it's things that I don't really see that over here. I don't know whether it's because there's a lot of Muslims already in Europe, so people are more aware, or whether it's just developing more now rather than when I was younger. So tell me more. You've started the Middle East Collective. So tell us more about that, and in what way does this help to empower women?
Well, the Middle East Collective is an initiative that I began to promote the understanding of the Middle East and North Africa, which is known as the MENA region, and the tolerance of Islam while embracing Muslim communities in the West. And the way that we're doing this is by trying to bolster the bridge between Muslims and non-Muslims, especially during this time of rising anti-Muslim sentiments in Europe as well. I mean, just recently there was this huge anti-Muslim march that happened in Warsaw, Poland, I believe last week. So we're trying to talk about these issues by collecting submissions in the form of photo essays, videos, poetry, personal narratives, and the like. Yeah. And we're really wanting to empower women by sharing their submissions, which often detail experiences as marginalized and disenfranchised members of society. So when I created this initiative, I wanted it to be a sort of safe haven where women from the Middle East and North Africa and the West can share their stories and views so we feel connected. And I really strive to be 100% inclusive and intersectional. I truly believe that feminism isn't really feminism unless we include marginalized women, especially women of color and queer women.
Yeah. And do you think the focus in the Middle East Collective, is it professional, as in business focus, or is it everything? It's creative, it's entrepreneurs, it's mothers at home. Does it include everything, or does it have a particular sector of women that it's focusing on?
So we're including submissions from all sorts of women as long as they have this underlying theme of wanting to connect the Middle East with the West. So we've had submissions from business owners in Egypt who focus on spiritual healing practices, to Muslim women in Qatar who are life coaches and who are mentors. And we also have submissions from people who just converted to Islam in places like Venezuela. So it's really amazing that so many different women can come together and share these experiences and really learn from each other, even if they're a professional or a student or a mother.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. Okay, so the differences between East and West are really quite considerable, and I believe that we can learn a lot from each other. I mean, I'm particularly interested in the East and, for example, how Japan and other Far Eastern countries respect and value their elders. And they don't just think someone is past it at the age of 50, as there's a tendency to do in the West. Now, I know obviously you're focusing on a different field because yours is Middle East, North Africa, things like that. So what differences do you think, or can you tell us more about, between MENA and the West, and how we can learn from each other and how we can accept each other's values and opportunities regarding women's rights and empowerment?
That's a very, very interesting question. Regarding women's rights and empowerment, the West and the MENA still have a lot of work to do. Women across both regions really want access to healthcare, education, the labor force, maternal coverage, food security, and respect from men in our communities. But that's not always the case in both regions. I think it's really important to take note of what progressive policies are actually helping women, and to listen to what women of all ages are asking for in order to be empowered. There are many differences, such as the infrastructure in the United States being much better than in the MENA region. But, in Cairo, for example, when I was living there, access to birth control and the morning after pill really amazed me. Compared to the United States, it costs little to nothing, even for Egyptian women. And women, sorry?
Really? I'm surprised.
Yes. And women who work in Cairo, they generally get 28 days paid vacation, while women in the United States typically get 2 weeks if we're lucky, and that's usually unpaid. So,
oh, wow. All right, that's a big difference.
Yes, a huge difference. So, there's many of these conservative Western politicians, generally men, who like to point fingers at the MENA region and say, oh, you're the other, you're so backward. But at the same time, the same thing could be said about our lack of development regarding women's empowerment in some fields. I mean, just look at some of the oppressive healthcare bills that politicians in the US have tried to pass in the past year or so.
Yeah. And how does that relate? Because I know you've been in Turkey, Germany, and Uganda, as well as Egypt and America, which you've mentioned. What about countries like Uganda? I mean, I really don't know much about Africa, unfortunately. I'd love to learn more, but there's a tendency, I think, to feel that a lot of African countries don't have the same advantage as more Western, or even some of the Middle Eastern countries. Would you say that's right, or do we have the wrong view of that regarding women?
I think it honestly depends. This could be a whole nother topic,
Sorry.
a whole nother interview in itself. But just to add to that, I lived in Uganda, in northern Uganda, which was a post-conflict war zone, after Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army left. And there was, still a lot of internally displaced persons, and the camp set up, and it was really what you would envision when you think of an African country. But I saw that education really plays a huge role in empowering women and girls, and thankfully there were numerous governments who were trying to donate funds or give money to making sure that these girls could receive an education. And I think that is one of the things that will help them in the future. Yeah. And I really hope that continues.
Yeah. So they're quite clued up with the idea of really promoting education and things like that. That's great to hear. So I know another question I wanted to ask you is about sustainable goals, particularly for women's careers and professional progress. Do you find in your experience that they're implemented in the same way all over the world, or at least the areas of the world that you specialize in? Or are there a lot of differences which depend on the economic, geographic and political factors?
I think it depends on all three of those factors, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the political economic situation of a country, I was in Egypt during 3 regime changes, and this led to a lot of calls for bread, freedom, social justice. This was a chant that was heard throughout Egypt and much of the Middle East during the uprisings that began around the period of 2011. And women at the time were really concerned about having representation in the ministries and in other offices, and they wanted to address the sexual harassment epidemic. And we're seeing facets of this now in the United States with the Black Lives Matter and Nasty Woman movements, where women of all ages and professions are coming together to demand empowerment. Yeah. However, there are men and women who are fighting against them because they like the way things have been working under the current patriarchal system. Geographically speaking, though, in the MENA and the West, it often depends on where women are located, because a district or a state may not have enough funds, or maybe there's not enough interest in allocating funds to these areas in order to focus on empowering these women socially, politically, and economically.
Okay, because I know I spoke to you earlier about Finland and the difference that the Finnish have in their educational system, and how it seems to be very different because it's so much more open, it's so much less stressed, it's more to do with happiness and not standardizing, which I think is a much better idea personally, because I'm totally against rigidity and having to follow exactly what everyone says. And I think open-minded and creative is better from the view of fulfillment, of progress, of sourcing more strengths. So do you think that also is something that can be taken into consideration in the MENA areas, or is that not really something that's relevant at the moment, because the focus is much more on trying to help with the religious tolerance and trying to help with women's empowerment in general?
In regards to the education and the type of lifestyle, do you mean?
Yes, sorry. I wasn't very clear, yes.
It's all right, not to worry. I think that Cairo, for example, is a bustling city. It's huge, and when they say a place never sleeps, it's true that Cairo never ever sleeps. Yeah. The education system has gone through a lot of reform in the past several years, I would say. I knew many women who were teaching there in Cairo, and the problem a lot of times is that you have these good classes and things of that nature, but then parents are investing so much money in private tutors for their students. Yeah. And so these kids are just constantly in school or being tutored or going to clubs and things of that nature. And then, of course, living in this environment where there are thousands of cars and constant noise and things like this. I mean, it is very exhausting, but if you don't know anything different, then somehow they manage to make it work. Yes. And on the opposite end of the spectrum in the US, it's a bit different, but our education is so expensive, and there are problems on both sides. I'm definitely with you, though. I think that these Scandinavian countries, Denmark as well, they have some great efforts going on that we can definitely learn from.
Yeah. Now, I was fascinated with this thing about Finland, because they don't have private schools or anything. So it really is a much simpler, happier way of doing it. So I love hearing about these type of ideas, which gives so much more freedom. But so from that, with sustainable goals, with the progress for women's empowerment, for tolerance, for open-mindedness, what progress do you think has been made over the last 10 or 15 years? And also, how do you see this continuing in the future?
As I was saying earlier, job security as a form of empowerment is something that women in the West and MENA region care about. We mentioned the role of education earlier, and in order to obtain a career in both of these places, that's so important in order to change the course of a woman's life. There's been incredible grassroots movements to provide education for women in entrepreneurial skills as well. And we're also seeing more women in both of these regions who are in male-dominated industries, such as foreign policy and news broadcasting. Just the other day, Nadine Abu Adair, a TV presenter in Saudi Arabia, said that women should lead prayers in the mosques and stand side by side with men during the prayers. And this is really such an incredible statement. And it's not something that could have been said 10 years ago. And I hope that no repercussions will come to her.
Yes.
We're also witnessing women in Iran who are protesting and violating the hijab law because they see it as a sign of oppression, and other community members, men as well, are actually sticking up for them. And I think in order to continue interrupting the norm and breaking glass ceilings, we have to have more men and women on board who are truly intersectional feminists, and we need to ensure women feel safe calling out those organizations and leaders and politicians who think diverse is just simply having 4 white heterosexual Christian women on a team of 10 to 12 heterosexual white men.
Yes.
The momentum is really building, and we just cannot let it stop.
Yes, yeah, we're seeing it everywhere. It's getting more and more. So what do you think the different regions and markets can learn from and also can teach each other?
Well, I think promoting transparency, accountability, and freedom of religion, speech, and press are areas that will really help markets in both regions move forward. And this is something that has been gaining a lot of attention in recent years. Post-Arab Spring, the MENA region had a lot of issues with freedom of speech and press. There were journalists and politicians who are getting locked up, and this is really unfortunate because if women especially don't feel safe enough to voice their concerns about what's hindering them from achieving equality, then those issues can't really be addressed. So I hope we'll just continue to brainstorm together and figure out better ways to remain transparent and accountable.
And are there any examples you can give us of things that have succeeded, or where they have learned from each other and they've done well with it?
I mentioned a bit earlier, but there are some great initiatives in the West that are helping these small businesses and startups in the MENA region. I'm currently in Berlin right now, and there's an organization called Impact, which provides mentorship to support entrepreneurs in the MENA region. There's also another really great initiative called Ground Truth Project, and they're a nonprofit organization that focuses on supporting social justice issues, training future news correspondents, and just searching for the truth in general. And they're currently working throughout the MENA region. There's so many that I can think of, but I think that bridging the two regions through such projects like what we're trying to do, what the Middle East Collective is trying to do, and just really listening to the stories from the people who are different from us will help us to learn more about how to achieve women's empowerment in the coming years.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
When you've got these types of initiatives, when you've got people trying to learn and to teach each other in general, how can women bring more of these goals, as well as accepting the different values and beliefs, so that it's a productive aspect of their community, but how can they also bring this into their own local environment and their everyday life? Because to me, you need to start at home, and then it grows and grows and grows. So what can they do to try and bring it more locally, more day to day?
That's a really great question, actually, and something that I've been speaking with a lot of my friends and other people in the field about. There's always debate about whether religion belongs in the government and in the workforce, but I think that helping to lift other women up is a goal that we can do regardless of their religion or our religion. There are many simple ways to do this, like sharing a Black Muslim woman's post on social media, or buying something from a Muslim-owned shop, or donating to a charity that gives back to the Muslim community. If there's a multicultural event in your community, take a friend and go. And have those difficult talks at the kitchen table. You said it starts in the home, and I completely agree with that. And, be respectful and ask questions, listen, learn. And those are really the forms of acceptance and tolerance that's easy to implement.
And do you think it works both ways? Because sometimes we hear that one side is more open than the other, and it can be either side. So do you think that this needs to happen really from every aspect, whatever religion, whatever colour, whatever vision that we have, that everyone is more open and more supportive for everybody else? So the Muslim families talk about helping and supporting non-Muslim families as much as the other way around. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I certainly do, and I think that is the way to go about it. Whenever as a side story, I first met one of my best friends in Egypt. We are so close now. I can stay with her and her family whenever I go back to Cairo. I met her actually in a bathroom in Alexandria in Egypt in 2010, I believe. And we've been great friends now for almost 8 years. And her family, many of them don't speak English, and they are wearing hijab, and they're quite conservative, but they have just swallowed me up, and they've been so kind. And she always translates, because my Arabic isn't fluent, unfortunately, not yet. And, it's great because they ask me questions about being a Christian, or they ask me how I feel as a Christian in Egypt, or they ask me about how are Christians and Muslims talking in America. And it's incredible that these people who have never been to America and who have never met another American want to know more. And I think it's really nice that we can sit around and have a cup of tea and have those conversations. And I think that it's something that everyone should do, regardless of if they're a Hindu or Buddhist or atheist or whatever, just talking to each other and being open and tolerant.
Yes.
We definitely need more of that.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think when people can just sit and relax and ask questions so they can be curious, that just does so much to help everybody progress. So I know that's talking about the local environment and our everyday life, which to me is an easier aspect to broach than maybe careers and companies, because it tends to be more rigid, I think, in the professional world. So how can we bring more of this open-mindedness, this sort of intercultural support into our careers? And also, what can companies and organizations do to help this and to encourage their employees to think more about their fulfillment, but fulfillment in the aspect of everybody supporting each other, not being prejudiced, not being biased, not having this close-minded rigidity that no, it can't be a different way, or no, this isn't the right type of religion or colour or gender or whatever. Do you have any ideas about that?
That's another really great question.
Good.
It is something that many people have been talking about, especially because of this Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that there's so much information out there already, and it's not really up to the marginalized women or people of color to inform us white people any longer, because it's very strenuous and tiresome for them to have to put themselves out there constantly and to educate us in that way. So I think, in a professional setting, or as someone who's working on their career, it's kind of up to you to educate yourself with that information on how to be more tolerant and how to be more open. If you're a manager, be sure to think intersectionally. And if you're planning an event, invite multicultural organizations and give the mic to a woman of color. It's important for us to be inclusive in our professional journeys and increasing representation wherever we can. There's some groups like the Attaway Group, Southern Poverty Law Center, and American Civil Liberties Union. They're great examples of companies and organizations that actually provide information to individuals and organizations who want to embrace justice, tolerance, and gender equality. So I think that everyone should check out those websites and kind of see what they can do to facilitate this.
Yeah. I know there's another lady I interviewed a few months ago now, Mariela Daba, of the Red Shoe Movement, and she's particularly supportive of Latinas because she's Argentinian or Argentinian American, and she said that it's not just, like you're saying, it's not just the fact that you're a woman, it's the other aspects as well. So for Latinas, you've got the fact that you're a woman and you're Latina. For a lot of the women that you work with, the women that you support, they're a woman and they're Muslim, or they're from the Middle East, or there's another aspect as well that makes it even more difficult. So I think anything that can help people realize that we're all the same, we're all just the people. So it's great to hear you talking about those organizations and how they can help. Okay, well, that's been really interesting. Have you got any last tips that you can give us, or some advice on how we can start straight away to help improve